Hi everyone, my name's Diabedor, and today I'm going to show you the
scientifically optimized
Ice Spear build I just made. Ice Spear is an Ash of War that's super strong and cool as hell, and if you want to use it, this is the guide for you. I'm going to try to keep this one short, so let's just get right into it. And if you find this video helpful, please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing. It really helps me out. As usual, I make my builds at level 125 using the Wretch as my starting class. These are just my personal preferences, and you can bring this build up to whatever level you want using any class you want. If you're making it from scratch, then the Astrologer will get the most optimal results. But in this case, that'll just amount to an extra point in intelligence and 5 extra points in mind, so it's not a huge deal. For our stats, we start off with the usual 60 Vigor. Vigor is by far the most important stat in this game, regardless of who you are or what your build is, and you get more value out of leveling it to 60 than you get by spending points in any other stat. It doesn't matter how cool your magic spears look if the boss insta-kills you before you can get one off, so get 60 Vigor. Up next are Mind and Endurance, both of which I left at 10. Ice Spear only uses like 15 FP per cast, so with 78 FP at 10 Mind, you've got 5 casts before you need to drink an FP flask, which is often enough to finish an entire boss fight because this shit is just so strong. As for Endurance, I optimized the armor loadout so that having 10 Endurance puts you just before the heavy load threshold, so as long as you're using the gear in this build, then you'll be fine. Now come the damage stats. We're using the Clayman's Harpoon as our main weapon, which requires 12 strength, 10 dex, and 12 intelligence to wield. The Astrologer starts with the lowest strength at 8, which means that any class can two-hand the spear using the 50% strength bonus you get by two-handing to be able to wield it. So I didn't put any points into strength at all and just left it at 10. As for dex and intelligence, we're trying to optimize for the damage of Ice Spear. I want to keep this short, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but basically, the damage of bullet ashes of war, that is, ashes which shoot projectiles to do damage, calculate their damage based on what affinity the Ash of War provides by default. Ice Spear provides the cold affinity by default, meaning it calculates its damage based on your intelligence and dexterity stats. It's more complicated than that, and if you want to read about it, there will be a link to a document down in the description. But basically, if you want Ice Spear to do the maximum damage, you need a weapon that gets good dex and preferably intelligence scaling, and you want to use the keen, magic, or cold affinity on it. In my testing, using this handy bullet damage calculator, also linked in the description, I found that the Clayman's Harpoon will get the best results for Ice Spear, using the keen affinity with an investment of 50 dex and 44 intelligence. I chose those specific numbers based on how many stat points I had to work with after getting 60 Vigor, which came out to be 74 points. So why 50 dex and 44 int specifically? First, dex contributes more to Ice Spear's damage because it scales with dex, and the keen affinity provides much higher dex scaling than the cold or magic affinity will provide dex or int scaling. So you want a bunch of dex. I stopped at 50 because that's one of the soft caps for elemental attack power. Credit to my boy Slay for making the soft cap cheat sheet. And so once you reach that soft cap, you start getting more value out of leveling intelligence instead. I incidentally had enough points to get it to 44 using the Wretch, or 45 using the Astrologer, and as you'll see, we're going to use the Stargazer heirloom to bring that up to 50 and squeeze the most damage out of it. That's it for the stats, so now let's talk about the weapons, talismans, and armor. Our main weapon is going to be the Clayman's Harpoon, using the Ice Spear Ash of War, obviously, and the Keen Affinity, which I believe will get the best damage for Ice Spear. Now, if you know of a better weapon to use, then let me know in the comments, and I'll test it and pin it, but I'm pretty sure this is the best choice. I didn't test every single weapon, but considering this one has good dex and intelligence scaling by default, it stands to reason that it's going to be the best choice for Ice Spear. We've also got a dagger with the Golden Vow Ash of War, which buffs your damage by 11.5% and boosts your damage negation by 7.5% for 45 seconds, making it a really nice buff to have. And finally, we've got the Staff of Loss, which we're using just to cast Terra Magica. I chose the Staff of Loss specifically because it's really easy to get, and it has a very light weight at only 2.5. The sorcery scaling doesn't affect Terra Magica, so it doesn't need to be a strong staff or optimized for our stats or anything like that. It just needs to be a light one. Up next are the Talismans. I provided two versions of the Talisman loadout. Both versions use the Magic Scorpion Charm, which increases all magic damage you do by 12% at the cost of increasing physical damage you take by 10%. Ice Spear does magic damage, so that one's a no-brainer. There's also Shard of Alexander, which boosts Ash of War damage by 15%, again, an obvious choice, and the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman, which increases your physical negation by 20% and so helps to offset the Scorpion Charm's debuff. Then I provided two options for the final talisman slot. The first one uses the Ritual Sword Talisman, which increases all damage you do by 10% while you're at max health. This is a nice buff, but it requires you to stay at max health, which can often be challenging, and you miss out on potential damage because it's incompatible with the Blood-Sucking Crack tier, which increases all damage you do by 20% but drains your health over time, which obviously means that you won't be at max health to proc the Ritual Sword Talisman. Personally, I also find the noise that the Ritual Sword Talisman buff makes to be obnoxious as fuck, so instead I made an alternative loadout which uses the Stargazer Heirloom instead. The Stargazer Heirloom increases your intelligence by 5 points, helping to squeeze out that last bit of damage from Ice Spear. It's not a super optimal talisman to use. For example, something like a Blade of Mercy is probably the best choice here, because Ice Spear does a bunch of poise damage, making it relatively easy to get stance breaks, so you can then get a crit and proc the 20% damage bonus from Blade of Mercy. But I opted to go with the more consistent, constant damage increase that you get by having the +5 intelligence from the Stargazer Heirloom. There's more to making a solid build than just looking at DPS under optimal circumstances, and I feel like the Stargazer Heirloom is a better choice for the average player, but the other options are there if you want them. Also, since Stargazer is lighter, it saves us a point in endurance. You're going to want 11 endurance if you use the Ritual Sword or Blade of Mercy, because with 10 endurance, that'll put you in heavy load if you use those talismans instead of the Stargazer Heirloom. That's it for the talismans, so now let's move on to the armor. If you don't have the DLC, then you're going to want to use the full Spellblade set, which buffs Magic Ashes of War by 2% per piece worn, for a little over 8% total. If you have the DLC, then you can mix and match the Spellblade set with the Rakshasa set, which boosts all damage you do by 2% per piece worn, but is also heavy as fuck. I went with the Spellblade chest and Rakshasa's helm, gloves, and pants, which let us just stay in medium load with all of our gear equipped. Now, there's actually something interesting that I observed and I want to point out here. So theoretically, both the Rakshasa set and the Spellblade set should boost Ice Spear's damage by about 8.2% when wearing all 4 pieces of either set. And it shouldn't matter whether or not you mix and match, because each piece of each set provides a 1.02x or 2% damage bonus to it. However, the full Rakshasa set makes it do ever so slightly more damage than the Spellblade set. I'm talking about a difference of, like, when I was doing testing, it was a difference of like 9 points of damage. So I have no clue why it's like that, and again, if you have a good explanation for this, let me know in the comments, because I really want to know what the hell's going on here. If they're both 2% buffs, then they should provide the same results, but they don't. Anyway, finally, we move on to the spells and buffs. We've got one spell for this build, which is Terra Magica. Terra Magica places a magic seal on the ground, which increases all magic damage you do by 22.5% while you're standing in it, which is very nice. You could add other spells like Great Glintstone Shard, Night Comet, Carrion Slicer, etc. to this build, but I was really focusing on Ice Spear specifically, so I didn't bother with any of them. And honestly, Ice Spear is generally more than enough, because it's fucking brutal. As for the Wondrous Physic, we've got the Blood-Sucking Crack tier and the Magic Shredding Crack tier. The Magic tier increases your magic damage by 20% for 3 minutes, which is very nice, and the Blood-Sucking tier increases all damage you do by 20% for 3 minutes, but at the cost of draining your health by 23 points per second when you're at 60 vigor. This is a very strong tier, but you gotta keep an eye on your health bar while you use it. Alternatively, you can swap out the blood-sucking tier for the Opaline Hard tier, which increases all your damage negations by 15% for 3 minutes, making you much tankier. This is what I generally recommend you use, since I personally don't care for the health drain from the blood-sucking tier, but if you want to see stupid damage numbers, then the blood-sucking tier is absolutely the way to go. In addition to those, you should also get Boiled Crab, which increases your physical negation by 20% for 60 seconds, helping to make you tanky as hell. There's also one more buff that you can add to this build, which I want to mention, and that's Offsac, also known as Offhand Sacred Order. You'll see a card linking to my video about it in the top right corner of the screen. So if you take 2 points out of intelligence, so bring it down to 42 or 43 if you're an astrologer, and put those 2 points into strength, that way you can one-hand the Clayman's Harpoon. And so what you can do is get a dagger with the Sacred Order Ash of War and put that in your left hand. If you cast Sacred Order and then wield the spear one-handed, so that Sacred Order is still active on the dagger, if you two-hand the spear, then you lose the Sacred Order buff. You have to keep it one-handed so that the dagger is still glowing. If you do that, then Sacred Order gives you another 10% damage boost, which just makes your damage go even more through the roof. So if you want to do that, you can. I didn't bother to do it because it's just not something that I like to bother with when I make builds for people to actually use. You know, every new buff you add to it makes it more complex and kind of annoying to use, you know, when you have to add more shit to your buff routine. So I didn't include that in this build, but if you really want to start maximizing your damage, that is definitely the way to go. So anyway, that's it for this build. I'm going to do things differently today and skip the gameplay showcase, because nobody watches the gameplay showcases. You've seen plenty of gameplay in the background, and it's pretty simple to use Ice Spear. Just make sure you use the buffs and you'll be fine. Specifically, before you start boss fights, you want to drink the Wondrous Physic, then eat a boiled crab, then cast Golden Vow, then drink one of your blue flasks to refill your FP, and then you can go into the boss fight, and if you're going to use Terra Magica, you can cast Terra Magica, and then switch to the spear and start attacking the boss. You want to use the buffs in order from longest to shortest, and that's the order to go in. So anyway, I'm going to end this video here, and if you liked it, then please leave a like, share the video, and consider subscribing, because all those things really help me out. I have more builds in the works, so stay tuned for those, and if you have any requests, be it for a build guide or some other video related to Elden Ring, then comment down below. Thanks for watching, my name is Diabedor, and I will catch you later.